Have a good week? No. Everyone had a rough week, didn't you? Yes. I know. So I'm going to address it for you today. Everybody's been through the ringer. It's just been a rough week for everybody. So I have like a prophetic message, and I also have like some instruction. And then we'll see where we go. The next David Hart's going to be really good. I mean, seriously, going to be a very good. There is a lot of new people going to come in for that meeting. I talked with a pastor yesterday from Minnesota who has 2 students he's sending here. One that's already moved here with his family. He was supposed to be here this morning. He's going to start coming here with his family. And the other student doesn't know it, but he wants to come here for school. His parents have already approved him coming, and they've already told the pastor he's coming. They're just waiting for him to come to the parents to ask permission to come, which he's doing this morning. So we should know that. That should all be settled this afternoon. Mike Harmon is going to come. He's going to be one of the speakers at David Hart from Clinton, Mike and Cheryl, and they've connected with us. The whole Clinton meeting kind of went in a different direction. And yet Mike, he sent me a text message about coming that direction to speak into his group. He has a group of about 30 or 40 that he's discipling. And so I'm looking at starting these traveling teams to go out and do day schools on Saturdays in different places of the state, which I think is going to be really good. We've been dialoguing for almost 4 or 5 months. He's wanting to get together and meet. He's talking of coming. I got a young apostle in Davenport who I connected with through Facebook. We've not met, and we're dialoguing back and forth, and he's coming to the David Hart. So there's going to be a variety of different people come. I feel like this David Hart is a connecting point type thing for all these different streams in the state to start to come. And then Dave Kelly sent me a prophetic word this week and literally just outlined everything that's going on and what we're thinking about and da-da-da. So that was very good. So it's just been a full week of activity, spiritual activity, and there's also been a full week of spiritual chaos and all kinds of things coming at everybody from all kinds of angles. Probably the biggest thing that I'd summarize it all up is discouragement. That's probably the underlying thing, which is a spirit that's working, trying to get you off track of your destiny and why you're on the earth and all of that. And so somehow we've got to push through this moment of time. Because what happens in discouragement is your vision is off of your destiny and your vision is on your circumstance. And you got to get refocused and reprogrammed. You actually got to get dismantled. It would probably be a very good word to describe what needs to happen in lives. Dismantling sometimes is not fun, but it's necessary. So I have like two veins of thought today that we'll try to merge as one. How's that? So I got 2 things. One is found back in the book of Joshua and a couple other places. The other one is found in the Gospels. And basically, I've talked recently, just hinted at it, about going to the other side. That we've got to go to the other side of things. We've got to go to the other side of life. I know there's several people watching today on the stream. They're probably watching because they're going through the same things. So it's interesting how God does things. So I'll give you some verses. We'll talk about it. We'll get going. So, Father, I thank you today that you would open up a window of heaven through your word into our hearts. You would reprogram us and take us to the other side with strength and courage. And we would come out of this today walking a different walk with a different perception and seeing what you have called us to be and do upon the earth is the destiny that you'd planned for us in your heart. Lord, I just thank you for that. I thank you for your word coming alive unto us and being a lamp unto our feet. In Jesus' name, amen. So, there's a pattern that starts to emerge in the Gospels And it's literally Jesus gets in a boat and goes to the other side. And he does this probably no less than 8 or 10 times in the Gospels. I'll give you some of the examples, and then we'll look at some of the examples. In Matthew 14:22, probably the beginning example, kind of, but it's later on in the Gospel, is he went to the other side and he went up a mountain to pray. And generally when you see him going to the other side, he's leaving something behind to embrace something in the future. So he goes up, he leaves, he goes to the other side, he gets on a boat, goes to the other side, leaves the crowd, goes up to a mountain to pray. In John 6:22, the disciples are going to the other side, and they can't find Jesus to go to the other side with them, and everybody's running around the harbor trying to see, are any of the boats missing? That's basically my paraphrased version. It's not the Living Bible, but it's my paraphrased version. So he goes, and they're looking like, where did he go? Did he go to the other side? What was happening is they knew that when he went to the other side, something was going to happen. And so they knew they were in it. See, when you're going to the other side, you're in a transitional moment of life. And that's really where all of us are at. We're in a very transitional moment. No wonder there's opposition, because we're about to transition into what we're really supposed to do. But what happens is the disciples finally say, well, we got to go to the other side, whether he's coming with us or not. So they get in the boat and they go to the other side, and he's already on the other side. So he's always ahead. When you try to go to the other side, he's always ahead of you getting there. And he's sitting there, and what's he doing? He's cooking fish. And nobody knows how he got to the other side, so he supernaturally got to the other side. Remember, there was another time where the disciples are on the boat, and here comes Jesus walking across the water, and literally the disciples' fear and lack of faith distracted him from getting to the other side, and he had to hop in the boat with them and save them. But he was like, what's he doing? He's like, I got to get to the other side. I don't need a boat. I'll just get there. I'll just walk on the water. I'll get to the other side. Doesn't matter if there's a storm or what's going on. So you see another time, Mark 5:1, Jesus goes to the other side, gets out of the boat, and the first thing he does is he delivers a man full of demons called Legion. Every time he went to the other side, there was something that happened. In Mark 4:35 through 41, it says they passed over together to the other side. The word other side means to go beyond. Go beyond what has been, go beyond what you're thinking, go beyond your faith, go beyond your expectations, go beyond, meaning there's something out there that you've not yet experienced in God. And yet you see, if you don't see that, you'll get discouraged to stay where you're at. So there's a storm that comes, and this is the one where the storm is there. And the storm is raging, and it's kind of like how probably a lot of people have been this week. Storm of life is hitting you, and the disciples are all sitting there, and here's what you really need to hear. They are there not because they're in a storm, not because of sin in their life or their life is messed up. They're in a storm out of obedience. And most of the storms we're all experiencing and going through in life are because of our obedience, not because of our failures, shortcomings, lack of, no faith, however you want to put it. That is not what's causing the storm. The storm's coming because of your obedience. It's all in your perceptions. And yet in the midst of the storm, Jesus is sleeping, and they all are thinking they're perishing. And yet what happens is every time you think you're perishing, you're actually very close to your destiny. And they're sitting with Christ in the boat, and they think that he's not answering. He's sleeping. It's like we're in a life storm. Where's Jesus? I'm crying out. I don't hear nothing. He don't like me. He's far away. I need to be punished. It's whatever weird thing we come up with in our mind. And yet he's at rest because he knows the storm really has no effect. And we got to learn how to rest in the midst of storms when we're going to the other side. You see, every time you head in a direction to go to the other side, your chances are pretty good. You're probably going to hit some form of a storm. So what happens? He comes out of his sleep. They wake him up. and he rebukes the wind, and he says to the storm, and so really what he's doing is he's addressing two areas. He's addressing the heavens, and he's addressing the earth, and he rebukes, which means he charged sharply the wind. And so in the midst of the storm, he's charging the wind with something to stop. He's using his authority. He's using faith. And then he's speaking to the earth realm, be silent and close your mouth is what it actually means. Shut up. Don't want to hear this anymore. But yet in the midst of it, the guys still were fearful. And it's almost like what happens is we get caught in a perception of the storm we're in, and the storm we're in dictates to us even after we get answers from God. And we stay almost locked into that, not being able to press out of it because we've gotten used to the storm that's bombarding us, and we think we're deserving of the storm, or it's our portion in life. I've got to live in this storm when you don't have to. And the first thing that happens when he gets to the other side, and you know, he has another other side experience in Mark 5:21. I mean, these guys are really learning some stuff through these going to the other side events. And in Mark 5:21, he goes to the other side, and he gets out of the boat, and the first thing he does there is he raises Jairus' daughter from the dead. I mean, isn't it amazing the amount of miracles that are happening the moment his feet hit the ground and he gets to the other side? He gets to the other side, and after he raises Jairus' daughter, the woman with the issue of blood comes up and touches him. And he starts into a whole dynamic of ministry by getting out and going to the other side. In Mark 8:1 through 18, he feeds 4,000. And the second he gets done feeding the 4,000, guess what he does? He goes to the other side. He's not caught up in what he's doing. He gets in the boat again and goes, well, there's more. There's more to all of this than feeding this 4,000. There's more to all of this. Goes to the other side. And they get to the other side, and in verse 14 it says they only have one loaf of bread. And Jesus now starts to open up the whole dynamic of the other side. And he starts talking to him about the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. He has one loaf. They just got done with a bunch of loaves feeding, and all this is going on. I mean, it's really wild. And he says there's a leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees you need to be aware of, guys. And that word leaven means mental and moral corruption. There is mental corruption going on inside of you. It's why we keep going to the other side of things. There is a thinking that's screwed up, and it's pharisaical, if there's such a word, which means that it has a religious spirit attached to it. And it is of Herod. It has a civil government spirit attached to it. Civil government has leaven in it. It has mental and moral corruption. So does institutionalized Christianity. It has corruption within it. And he talks to them that they were desiring a sign like they just did. And he's like, you know, guys, you don't even understand about this bread because the bread of life is setting in the boat with you. You guys are like so blinded to who I am and what I can do because of this leaven in your mind, this corruption in your mind. You're constantly like, oh my gosh, you know. And so the Lord started speaking to me a little bit about Iowa and about what our assignment is, about the David Hart. I'm so focused on David Hart right now. I'm having a hard time. I had a hard time even getting focused for this morning. It took me till like 8 o'clock last night to even start to think about this morning. I was like, I'm over here on this other thing. But he started talking to me about that. What happens when you go to the other side is you get mantled with something to release people's destiny. And we're going to the other side. This next David Hart we are going to the other side in that meeting that day. There is something that's going to drop in this room that will mantle us to free people that are in bondage. Be them demon-possessed, be it whatever. That's why there's a storm coming at you, because the enemy sees and knows what we're carrying. And he's trying to derail us in this, thinking that we're going to sink or that we're not going to make it to the other side of things. You're going to make it fine. You always have. And it's like, why are we going to the other side? Because we've been destined to go there. We have not been destined to stay where we're at. None of us are happy where we're at. We're all looking for something that's more than what I've experienced. So we see something on the horizon, and we're waiting for a boat to get there, and it's time we just start to walk on the water. God will take you there supernaturally. He'll get you to the other side before anybody else gets there. You'll be cooking the meal for him. That's all prophetic, in case you didn't realize that. But see, many of us are sitting here waiting, and yet what's trying to hold you back right now is not your personal life. It is your destiny of what you represent on the earth. That's why all of the storm comes and all the goofy stuff comes. And here's how this starts to unpack. There is a lot of people's destinies being held by us not stepping into our destiny. There's a lot of people at stake who have a destiny in God, just like a man full of demons with legion, like Jairus' daughter had a destiny. Like every single person that Jesus touched on the other side had a destiny, and it was being held up until he got on the other side. And it's the same thing. This state is full of hopelessness. It was prayed in the prayer room this morning. The state is full of people needing healed. The state is full of demon-possessed people and people that they don't want to change. They want to stay where they're at. I mean, it's crazy what we have a state full of. And yet, when we start to go to the other side, it's as if God mantles our faith to do the impossible when we get there. There's something about getting in the boat and going that causes faith to be ignited about what you're about to experience. And so it's like many, and here's how I worded it. Multiplied hundreds are going to be touched by us making the decision of going beyond. There has to be a holy dissatisfaction in us to go beyond. There has to be an appreciation for what we have, but a holy dissatisfaction that says, I'm after something more. I can't live like this. I got to get to the other side. And the motivation is not to free me from my storm. It's actually, I'm knowing that I'm going into a storm to get there, but my motivation is to free the ones that don't even know a storm is around them. That has to be the motivating factor of what we do. We can't be doing this for ourselves. So we have to go beyond where our faith has been. We have to go beyond what we know. And we have to go beyond areas of truth even that we perceive to know. We've got to go beyond all the obstructions, and we got to go beyond even the things that are hindering us. And somehow we've got to like grab hold of ourselves and rise up. Because here's the deal, Jesus is not going to drop you in the boat. You actually have to decide you're getting in the boat to go. If you're waiting for somebody to carry you on a stretcher, I know they did it and tore the roof off and dropped the dude down there. The guy was healed before, when the roof started going off, the guy got healed in that moment. He didn't get healed because he got in front of Jesus. He got healed because somebody decided to get him there. And they pressed through the crowd. But every time Jesus went to the other side, he started dismantling someone's past. And that is the reason of going there. It's a dismantling and a tearing down of even the life history of a person, the mindsets, the understandings, the religious junk and garbage that they've carried. It's a total dismantling. And you've got to go to the other side to dismantle somebody's past. Somebody's got to get there. And so maybe even today, you got to get your past dismantled. And things of your past history in your life and how you look at things has got to be dismantled. Because here's what they all had in common on the other side. Those people that got their things dismantled, they all were programmed to failure. They were all set up to fail. They were all set up to be locked in bondage. They were all set up with facts, experiences, and opinions that caused them to be locked down. And they were wondering, can we ever get out of this? I mean, that dude with Legion, can you imagine? Am I ever going to get free? Wondering, here's Jairus. I know he can heal her, but can he heal her? And when you read the verses, it doesn't even say that he healed her. The assumption is he healed her. He raised her from the dead. So it's almost as if like God is saying, that was such a simple thing, I didn't even have him write it down. You hear what I'm saying? And yet we get amazed at something like that. And he's like, no, that's like nothing. Just get a grip. So the question comes, what's required to go to the other side? That's really what we need to know. So that's where I go back to Joshua. I go back to Deuteronomy. I'll read a couple things in Deuteronomy, then we'll read Joshua. What's required to go to the other side? What's required to go beyond all this? How do I get past where I've been? I mean, because you know what happens? We get so used to being and thinking where we're at that we think that's normal. That's our portion. And we actually just get so accustomed to the status quo that the status quo becomes our new normal. So what's really required? So the answer is very simple, but has a lot to it. So this is part 2. I got 2 parts, and I had to figure out how to fuse them. I'm like, that's really cool. I got this God, and I got this God. Now, how does that look together? In all honesty, I got all of this in an hour last night. I got like a download in an hour. But it took me most of the day to get there. It's just how it goes sometimes. It's been a storm happening. Deuteronomy 31, 3 through 6. And 6 is the main focus. And Moses, the Lord thy God, he will go over before thee. Moses is talking to Joshua. He says, the Lord's going to go before you. That's really nice. That's a real nice thing. That makes me happy. And he will destroy these nations from before thee, and thou shalt pass them. And Joshua, he shall go over before thee. I've had to tell you that now twice. As the Lord hath said, and the Lord shall do unto them as he did unto these nations, and unto the land of them whom he destroyed. And the Lord shall give them up before your face, that you may do unto them according to all the commandments which I have commanded you. I mean, that is a pretty good promise. And you know what happens? We get a promise like that God is going to do something for us, but it doesn't convince us. And we're wanting that promise to carry us to the other side, but that promise can't carry you to the other side because God requires you to do something to get to the other side. And I think the church is full of promise. God's going before us, and God's taking the land, and God's going to destroy our enemies, and God's going to work for me, and God's going to do this. Then why aren't we doing it? Because we've gotten so used to the status quo, and it's like we're hoping God shows up, but he hasn't showed up. I was in a storm. I didn't understand the storm, and he was he anywhere? He was sleeping. It was like it's like We get caught up in the status quo of either not going on the journey to the other side, or we go out in the sea and we just row around in circles. And we're waiting for him to be our rudder. And he's not necessarily our rudder. So he comes down to this and he says in verse 6, be strong and of good courage. Fear not, because I know you have it. Do not be afraid of them. He says it twice. For the Lord thy God, He it is that doeth good with thee. He will not fail thee nor forsake thee. You know how we always like that verse? He'll never leave me nor forsake me, but I don't have to be strong and have courage. And we quote the back half, but we don't quote the front half of my role in this. We just want God's role in it. You see? He says it again in verses 7 and 8 of the same chapter. And Moses called unto Joshua and said unto him in the sight of all Israel. So now he calls him out in front of the whole congregation. And he says, be strong and of good courage, for thou must go with this people unto the land which the Lord has sworn unto their fathers to give them, and thou shalt cause them to inherit. And the Lord, He it is that doeth good before thee. He will be with thee. He will not fail thee, neither forsake thee. Fear not. That's 3 times now. Neither be dismayed. You know what keeps you locked from going to the other side is fear. We have fear of getting there. We have fear of letting go of our discouragement. We have fear of letting go of our dismay. We have fear. Oh my gosh. And he addresses it 3 times with Joshua, who's kind of like been around and seen some things. This is the next leader of Israel to take them into the land of promise. And yet, there's this fear that's being addressed. So what is in Joshua's hands that he has to lead? He has to lead the destiny of people. He's got a whole group that's going to the other side. You know what we have in Iowa? We have a whole group that needs to go to the other side. A whole big group of people. Got to get to the other side. And this land is sitting there before Joshua. The assignment's sitting there in front of him. I took the prophecy that Ray Hughes gave of a 133-mile radius from the point he was standing, that there would be an outpouring of God's Spirit that would be sustained for 30 years. Huh? So I did the circle of it. It's in I put it on my wall. I was going to bring it out, but I already stapled it to my wall in my office. And the circle, yes, it's Winterset and Creston. It does cover them. It swings up through there, goes up, touches Minnesota, goes around, encompasses all of the, it encompasses like this. And it goes clear around, catches all of Iowa and northern Missouri. Catches all of it. You realize how out of character that is for him to give that kind of a word. Very out of character. He don't give words like that. It's like, I see this, 133 miles. Of course, everybody's on their phone map, and where's that at? Am I in it or not? You know, it's like people are like, how far does that reach over? All of that. It encompasses that whole circle. To me, that's our land. It's our territory. It's our boundaries. It's what God has decreed. It's like, this is the assignment. And I started looking at that. I'm like, man, does that make life even easier? Another fine-tuning of going to the other side. You see what I'm saying? She's up here. You can come to the front row. But you know what he's having to battle? You know what God's having to dismantle in Joshua? 40 years of wilderness. 40 years of wilderness learning. 40 years of, we're caught out here. 40 years of, I thought there was a promise, but I don't see a promise. I'm going to the other side. I don't know if we'll get there. They're out there paddling on one side of the canoe. in a circle. And God's feeding them. And he's providing for them. And the manna is dropping from heaven. But what's about to happen is the manna is about to cease. Life as you know it's about to end. See, it's like God brings us to that point of holy dissatisfaction. Appreciation, but dissatisfaction. The problem is we interpret the dissatisfaction as discouragement, when it's actually to press us past the thing that we're battling in front of us and get us to where we need to be. So Joshua's been told twice to be strong and have courage. Be courageous. But then it comes 3 more times at the beginning of Joshua. Joshua 1:6, Joshua 1:7, Joshua 1:9. He literally is told again, dude, you need to be strong and of good courage, for unto this people shall thy divide an inheritance, the land which I swore unto their fathers to give them. Only be thou strong and very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do all according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right or to the left, that thou mayest prosper wherever you go. Have I not commanded thee? Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee wheresoever thou goest. He's told this 5 times, which is the number of grace. So there's a grace on what God is saying to him. And what I started looking at in this is every time there is a transitional moment in God upon the earth, he tells people to be strong and have courage. Every time. Let me go to the end of this and we'll back up to this. David said it to Solomon in 1 Chronicles 28:20 when he was about to build the house of the Lord. And David said to Solomon his son, be strong and of good courage and do it. Just do it. See, Nike robbed that out of the Bible. Just do it. Fear not. Don't be dismayed. For the Lord thy God, even my God, will be with thee. He will not fail thee. He will not forsake thee. And you will finish all the work of the service of the house of the Lord. Isn't it amazing that David saw Moses and Joshua going into the promised land, and he quotes the exact same thing to his son in a pivotal transitional moment in the history of the life of the church and the people of God. Yes, we didn't call it church then. It wasn't really ecclesia. So there's this dismantling that has to come. And the words strong and courageous are really very key words. I'll tell you what the words mean. The word strong means to prevail, to be firm, to be secure. It means to grow stout, meaning that you're going to have to decide what you really believe. It means to grow secure, to be secure, not insecure, because he's addressing the insecurity. It means to restore strength and give strength. It means to support and repair and take hold of and keep it. It means to use your strength. To use your strength. And all of that is describing somebody that's strong. But then when we talk about courageous, it talks about being alert and brave. You see, fear does not make you brave. Sinking ship doesn't make you brave. It means to be solid and firm and obstinate. That's a great word. Obstinate in the right way. Maybe I should qualify it. To be determined. To make yourself alert. Because you were probably sleeping on the boat. To confirm yourself. To prove superior to. Now, what is the difference? They sound very similar, don't they? I'm strong, I'm courageous. Yeah, they're the same thing. No, they're not. Strong is an action, and courage is the result of that action. Strong is the exercising of faith. Not knowing what you're walking into, but seeing a destination you're going. You're going to the other side. Courage is what's going to be produced in the going. It took courage to go, but it took faith to walk across the Jordan to face the Jericho with the giants in the land. But when the walking of faith created the courage to face. That's a good quote. So we'll go back to the verses. 6, 7, 8. He says, be strong, be courageous. Be strong, be courageous. Be strong, be courageous. Verse 6, Joshua is promised he will prevail. He is setting in a promise. You're going to prevail. That promise represents the Holy Spirit. He is the promise of God, the prevailing power of God, the overcoming power of God working in our lives. If you'll do this, if you'll be strong and courageous, guess what's happening? The Holy Spirit's coming into your life. Verse 7, Joshua is told if he has this strength because it is based on the commandments of God, the Word of God. You know what it's based on? It's based on Jesus Christ, the Word made flesh. The Trinity is setting in these 3 verses. So every time God is getting us to the other side, His presence of His triune being, His divinity is setting in the midst of the journey. It's just we don't see it. Because we're looking at storms of life and circumstance, but in the midst of it, He's setting there. Verse 9, Joshua is told to cast off his fears and the future because God is with him. It's the presence. And the Father's setting right there. So God is setting in our future to dismantle our past, and He had to dismantle the thought life of Joshua to go into the other side of things. He's going to the other side of the Jordan. He's crossing over into something new. So what is he crossing into? Because there's the state of the crossing, and what is he really crossing into? Now I'm going to mess with you a little bit. He was not crossing into the promised land. He was crossing into the land of promise. There's a big difference. The land was their promise, but it was not, they were going for the land, but it was not the promised land. It was a land that was full of the promises of God. And that was creating the land to be the promise. Hope you follow what I just said. Very different thinking. Because when we see it as the promised land, we think God is doing it for me. But when we see it as the land of promise, I'm partnering with God in the doing. You see? So, he speaks to him all these times, and he's speaking the same thing over all of us. We see this map of Iowa. Come alive, arise. That's our land. But it's not necessarily the land he's promised. It's the land that's full of promise. Our land is so full of promise right now. Our cities are full of promise of God inside people's lives and their journeys and all of that. And they're looking for a boat to get to the other side. There's a lot of people looking for a boat right now. So where was he going? He was going into a time of kingdom destiny on the earth. History was about to be rewritten. People's lives were about to be affected. An entire nation was coming into a greater realm and understanding of God. manna ceasing, past seasons closing, new seasons opening. And the Lord started speaking to me, and he said, the provision we're all looking for is coming from what he's promised in the land. It isn't because we get the land, we get the provision. It's because the promise of provision is setting in our land. That's why the Iowa band made covenant with our land, 100 some years ago, 150 years ago. They made a covenant that our land would always produce. There was a promise that was put into our land. The Lord started speaking to me, and he said, those that still seek manna are the ones that are disillusioned and discouraged. They're hanging on to this when this is setting in front of them on the other side. And you keep hanging on to this old manna. This manna is full of worms. It's rotting away. It's all that. But you'll seek and work to labor in the moment, the divine moment of God that's setting in front of us. That's where you're going to find the greatest satisfaction in your life. Satisfaction doesn't come because the storm got removed. Satisfaction comes because in spite of the storm, God's still present moving forward. The storm doesn't affect anything, but it can delay you from coming into what you really need to do. So David writes one more time in Psalms 31:24, and he says this. He says, be of good courage, and he will strengthen your heart, all ye that hope in the Lord. He's like, you want to get God involved in changing? Strengthen your own heart. Do what you know you need to do by faith, and see God then come in and strengthen that. And it says, all ye that hope in the Lord. So it's like, who's supposed to be leading to the other side? Those that have the hope in the Lord. See, it's like, you cannot expect somebody who's locked into yesterday's manna to lead you into your future. It just isn't going to happen. So these guys go on the journey to go to the other side. And if you stop and think about how many people in Scripture went on a journey to the other side. And in the midst of it, don't you think they had some opposition and some struggles and all of that? But in the midst of all of that, they got to the other side. Why? They just like they say, bucked it up, little buckaroo. Pull yourself up and get going. Kick yourself in the rear. Do something. Get yourself going out of where you've been. Yeah, all this is there, yeah. But it's like, is that bigger than God? Is that bigger than God's ability? Is our faith activating that to keep us locked into that? Or do we go out of that? And when you look back, fear's gripping, and fear's making decisions, and fear's this, and fear's that. And that is not of God. It's faith, and faith is strength. The greatest strength you'll ever get from God is your own faith. The faith to trust him, know that his promises are yes and amen. He's not leaving me. He's not forsaking me. I am on target. I have a storm, but the storm isn't my fault. I'm in the midst of storm. I'm going to tell you something. You're not getting through life without a storm. But it's what do you do in the midst of the storm is what's going to get you to the destination of your destiny in life of what you're to do with yourself. And Joshua's hearing reports. He's got 9 bad ones. He's got 1 good one. You know what I'm saying? It's like, this is crazy what we're about to embark upon. But yet he knows that right there is a land that is full of the promises of God. And all I got to do is get over the Jordan at flood stage here. That's all I got to do. I just got to cross this little river thing in front of me. It's running at full stream. And he doesn't know how he's going to do it, except God's going to do it. See, it's like, and he takes the steps of faith, and the river parts, and off they go, and they cross over, and they get to the other side. Every time you go to the other side, there's going to be something that your eyes will see that's going to try to convince your faith out of what can be. Every time you're going to come right up to the edge of it. Now, how do I get over there? And you sit and you wonder, and you try to figure and scheme and scam and however else you want to do it. And it's like all you got to do is step by faith into it, not knowing. And when you do that, then it's like it starts to move. You look at, here's Moses. His back is up. He's got Egypt. He's got the Red Sea. He's setting in a dire moment. He's got to get to the other side. He could sit there and whine, and they're all whining. Let's go back to Egypt. Let's go back to the wilderness. Let's go live in this because this is what we know. And God's like, I need to dismantle that. That's ridiculous. I'm going to dismantle it by simply doing this. Moses, raise your arms. Sea parts. You're like, what? How did that happen? Well, by faith, he raises his arms, and God says, now you can go to the other side. If you go back and read the account of Moses, you read that in the Hebrew, you know what it actually says? It's like this. When you decide to pass over, then I will divide it so you can pass over. But until you decide to pass over, it's basically not going to get opened up in front of you. And so how many of us we see clear out there that place that I want to go and I want to pass over, but we're waiting. It's like we're 2 steps away from the edge instead of putting our foot into it. And now we're waiting for God, and as soon as he passes, I'll go over. As soon as it goes and split, I'll move. And God's like, no, just get right up there and make a decision. You're going. It's moving out of the way. I'm coming to the other side of this thing. So you think about Jesus. Here's Jesus at the cross. He's got to go to the other side. Think about that. He's right at the moment of all these decision points. You don't think he didn't have some fear of what he was going to be faced with on the cross? You don't think he didn't want, like, I'm going to be so tortured and mutilated, but I got to get to the other side. I can't stay here. If I stay here, then all these people's lives and destinies aren't released. I got to get to the other side of this. So he faces the cross, as Hebrews says, endured the cross for the joy set before him. There was a joy he saw on the other side. And all of us see that joy that's sitting there on the other side, but we don't want to embrace that cross. You know what that cross really was? It was a dismantling of humanity. That's literally what it was. It was about the dismantling of humanity. He is completely dismantled to be a sacrificial lamb, put on an altar to go to the other side so you and me can be free. Now you put the same mix in the call upon our life into this state of Iowa. God is wanting us to come and get in the boat and go to the other side so we can get people free on the other side of this thing. It's the only way we're going to get there. It seriously is. You're sitting here waiting for God. You got to exercise your faith. You know, I posted that Kenneth Hagin video, you know, and all those people, suddenly the Spirit of God breaking out, this and that. I mean, literally, that was how we birthed a lot of things in the early days. That was like a typical meeting that went, we did that kind of stuff for every meeting for a couple years. We had times where, like, up in the mountains up there and down in Virginia, we were in those meetings, and oh my God, that was crazy. You know, whole room full of people, and suddenly everybody just pops out and starts driving cars around the room with the sound effects and the entire thing. And there's like 30 people. And the aisles were so narrow, and they're just running as fast as they can. And everybody hopped up in the exact same moment and went for 30 seconds. And everyone's like, and then they just suddenly just dropped in their seats all in the exact same moment. And we're all just looking at each other, and then the whole place just bust out laughing. I mean, just crazy, unexplainable things. And you know where they were? They were all on the other side. They were all on the other side.